Darling, we've had one hell of a time, but the question on everybody's mind, where is the
Hello and welcome to Ideas Don't Bleed, a comics podcast presented by Ashcan Press and featuring Matthew Rosenberg and the Supple Boiz, Ethan S. Parker, and Griffin Sheridan. This is part 2 of our discussion with ALEX PAKNADEL. We hope you enjoy.
You just brought up DC vampires. Would you like to chat about DC vampires for a little bit?
That's an interesting question. Alex, do you want to talk about DC versus vampires, All Out War, a book you write at DC Comics?
Is it escapism?
Is it? Well, first of all, how have you enjoyed the book? Do you like working on it? Do you feel like what are your feelings on it?
I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I got a call, like Matt gave me a call around just New Year, just like last New Year, wasn't it? Which was cool because it was a really it was a bit of a bummer of a time. And I got this call out of the blue. Matt just kind of said, do you want to do this with me? And honestly, there's a through line that is, there's definitely kind of a through line of like hard won redemption and putting the kind of the usual sort of ragtag group together that have no business being in the same team and sort of making them run a sort of a Rogue One style gauntlet and everything. But I mean, mainly I got to kill Jimmy Olsen, which was just felt so good,
Let's talk about that. Let's go dig deeper on that. Why do you hate Jimmy Olsen so much?
You and Zack Snyder.
but it's the bow tie, man. Like, it's the bow tie. Okay. I just don't think there's any excuse, in 2022 for kind of wearing a bow tie. No, it was interesting because we had that discussion earlier on, and I was preparing to kind of go into it just doing this book that would be like fractally depressing.
Yeah.
And then you and I ended up having this sort of quite liberating conversation where it was like, look, man, you have a lot of runway here because it's out of continuity to basically just think about really creative methods of dispatch for beloved superheroes.
Yeah.
And as soon as I sort of framed it in that way, I think I sort of discovered some stuff about myself.
Sure. Yeah.
I just had a ton of fun just thinking what if Booster Gold put force fields in people's heads?
Yeah. Yeah, it's very funny when I don't often feel like there's a lot of restraints on me when I write work for hire stuff, but there are, because there's restraints of respecting the continuity that are they don't have to put the restraints on you, because if you're at the job you already do that. You're in the room because you care about these things and you don't want to break them. And not that I really think breaking them is actually a real concept. I know it's a thing that fans throw around a lot, but I don't think you can break superheroes. But it's only when you go out of continuity that you're like, oh, all of these psychological things that have been holding me back. I want to see someone punch Superman's head off. Let's do it. It's a funny, liberatingly childish instinct, but also I feel like that instinct comes from being a fan and wanting to see the things you could never see. And I feel like when we embrace that as the creators, the fans also get the same thrill of oh my god, did you see this insane thing that happened that I've never seen before? And I think that's sort of the fun of doing the non-in-continuity stuff. I'm always sort of baffled when people do the non-in-continuity stuff and it's just a half a step to the left of what we're used to.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't know why bother. Like, it doesn't feel worth it to me. Like, go all the
It's
way or
super
don't go.
It's weird kind of doing it with Ben Abernathy as well, isn't it? Because like, given the kind of the level of responsibility that Ben has,
Yeah.
and generally, like, you know, the note that we'll get in terms of restraint is like, you know, maybe you can't show like all of the intestines.
Yeah.
But like, other than that, like, he just waves it through. Like, yeah, it sounds great. Go.
Yeah. Ben Abernathy, who's the executive editor at DC and the head of the Batman group, his enthusiasm for letting creators do the thing that's the most fun for them. Like, he has like a real passion for the idea that people enjoying their jobs do the best work. And so he gets really excited about ideas that get creators excited. And it's really infectious and crazy how good it is. And like, yeah, it's every time I write something where he like has to reel it in, and most of the time it's not him, most of the time it's DC legal that is like sending me notes being like, absolutely not, you cannot have these things. Ben is sort of gritting his teeth against them. Yeah, he definitely like doesn't. He's always just like, well, let's see how far we can take this thing. And it's, you know, it's true in Wildcats, it's true in Joker, it's true in DC versus Vampires. There's just a lot of like, let's see what flies. And that's a really fun. I think, you know, it's fun as a creator, and like I was saying, like for the fans, it's fun. It's fun to see have a company that is just like, let's see what we can do with these characters. Like, let's get them out on the open road and really go for it. Is really inspiring. Well, I'm glad you're enjoying making the book.
Yeah, thank you again.
It scratches all your you don't have to, that wasn't me fishing for a thank you, but yeah.
He's always doing this. He wants everybody to thank him on the show, so everybody else can hear it.
Yeah, guys, I co-wrote a book with someone. Listen, he's going to thank me for it. No, I think I
wasn't dragged up, man. Like, it's
I just it's a weird book, DC vs. Vampires. Like, it's a weird universe to play in, as like to spend so much time in there. Like, I had the luxury of writing DC vs. Vampires while I was writing other books that were in continuity. And I sort of am always like worried that you're like, yeah, I'm just murdering. Like, I know you've been doing some like shorts and one shots at DC and had other stuff, but like, this is the most time you've spent in the DC pool is like, yeah, murdering people. It's I worry about that for you as well. So I'm glad that it hasn't been too taxing on your soul.
No. I mean, it's been really cathartic. I'm ashamed to say
you worked some stuff out. I had one other question, and then I want to talk about the new book for a minute before we move on. But you are part of a writing group, collective. I don't know how you guys refer to yourselves. But the studio, but you're not actually. Yeah. Studio makes it feel like you're in a location, which you are not. You don't share an actual studio, because artist studios, they're in the same room, and you guys are not. But studio is fine if that's what you want. You know, I respect that. You're in a group called White Noise with Ryan O'Sullivan, Dan Waters, and Ram V, three other excellent writers. You know, like, how does that work? Like, how does that work for you? What do you get out of that? What do you guys do for each other?
It's really kind of and I don't mean this like pejoratively, but like the explanation of the thing is really quite banal. It's like, we talk to each other every day, right? So it's on, you could say like, really, it's a group chat, right? But more than anything, it's kind of, it's a layer of editorial before anything reaches editorial. Sure. So we kind of we sort of acid test ideas on each other before they kind of go out into the world, which I know, you know, plenty of writers do that, but we just sort of formalized it really and sort of made a bit more of a thing of it. but also it happens at the sort of conceptual level as well. So like we have this sort of tacit agreement that we'll talk, you know, if any of us kind of needs 11th hour help with anything, it's kind of there. So, you know, like, I mean, like hand to God, like there have been times when like I've needed to get a pitch in and just something isn't clicking, and I'll talk to Dan at like 2 o'clock in the morning, but it's reciprocal, right? So so, you know, there have been occasions when I've had to do that, and like, it is quite strange because, you know, there is this sort of, obviously there are exceptions, man. Like, you know, you're not going to do it if you're out sort of, you know, having a romantic dinner or whatever, you know, but like there's an understanding that like you'll do it when you get home, right? It's pretty kind of, it's pretty non-negotiable, but it always kind of works.
Sure.
But it's cool, man. Like it's just really cool. It just means that you've kind of perpetually got kind of people, you know, you just got like 3 people who kind of got your back like at all times.
Do you feel like it helped you guys gain sort of notice because you were all together and sort of throwing each other's names around? Like, do you feel like it furthered your career more than just creatively, but like perceptually to the public?
Again, in all candor, I mean, there are gigs I've gotten because Rams recommended me. You know, I don't mind saying that, you know, like in kind of all humility. I don't, you know.
Did he also invite you onto his podcast to say thank you?
You're supposed to do that.
You're supposed to. That's good form.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a funny one. It's sort of paid dividends in ways that I kind of wasn't expecting, and in a very sort of long tail kind of way. So like when we started it, you know, I did my usual thing, man. Like, you know what I'm like, man. Like, you've known me for years. Like, you know, I was very much like, so like, you know, let's all get married and like we'll start a common fund and we'll put a lot of money into it and we'll just co-own everything. And like Ram, who has a business background, just like went, no, none of that. Like if we make it a thing, like we will despise each other within about 6 months. Let's just keep it loose, and it'll be a thing. And yeah, I mean, I suppose we've been doing it now sort of 5 years, and obviously like there's clear water between all of us in terms of sort of where we are relative to each other, but like it's not like not to put too fine a point on it, you know, no one either feels or is made to feel like the Ringo. You know, it's all. It's you know, I must admit, like, you know, like it is really nice to have, you know, the guy who's writing detective comics like every now and then kind of pick up the phone and going like, can you help me out with this? Like that's great, man.
Yeah.
You know, that's nice. That's it's not like, it's flattering, frankly. You know?
I wanted to do just a couple sort of questions about them. Like,
sure.
Which one is the smartest of the 4 of you?
Dan.
Okay. Who's the best cook?
Me.
Is that real? Okay.
Yeah.
Who's the best kisser?
What the fuck?
I don't know.
What?
You never talk about cooking.
Yeah.
You don't talk about it. Maybe I'm just thinking of Ed Brisson, who talks about it all the time. So like, it's just in my head. If you're a good cook, you're just talking about it all the time. Who's the best kisser of the 4 of you?
Ryan.
Wow.
He does this amazing thing where like really kind of like wraps it around the esophagus. It's just, it's a full sort of sensory experience. Like it's quite rapturous.
So, I mean, I feel like those are the important questions, and I guess Ram's not really contributing much because you got the smartest, the best kisser, and the best cook. That's fine. Not everybody's going to pull their weight.
He always gets best hair. You know,
he has good hair.
He's amazing hair.
but that's not really important for a comic writer. Some of our best don't have any hair. Just putting that out there. But they're all good kissers. I don't know. Is this going to make it on the show? Probably.
I liked it a lot.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe it doesn't. Switching gears for the last half of this, you have a new book coming out, which by the time this airs may be out or imminently be out, depending on the speed at which we move. Talk about this book.
Okay. Yeah, it's go for it.
That's not how Conan
cool.
O'Brien does it, Matt.
It should be. Maybe not. You made us think. What is it,
dude?
Why'd you do it?
I'm trying to do my bit. And like,
it's so hard to do when you just started doing the book and you just don't have it yet, and it's just like I know all the things there are to know about the book, but I don't know how to say it in 2 sentences. But now's your chance to test it out. Go for it.
Is that how long I have? I have 2 sentences.
No, you have as much time as you want, but it should be 2 sentences. But yeah, you're gonna be long.
Okay. I got a book dropping December 7th called All Against All from Image Comics and the Syzygy imprint. And it's the way we're sort of describing it the way we're sort of cross-pitching it is basically like, what if the xenomorph from Alien were Tarzan, right? So the idea is like it's the far future, and there's these aliens that have found a kind of derelict Earth, and they have harvested samples from. There's this seed bank in Norway that has all these like frozen embryos in it, and what they do is they set an Earth habitat running on one of their kind of spaceships. They don't know how anything fits together, so they're putting like polar bears in with gorillas, and like it's a complete catastrophe. And they don't know what human beings are. So basically, they set a bunch of them running, and they don't live very long because infant human beings can't look after themselves. But one of them survives. And like years later, they kind of go back into this habitat because they're trying to weaponize it. There's a war going on like far across the galaxy, and they're trying to kind of harvest the most kind of aggressive genetic traits from this sort of habitat. And they don't realize that they've got like basically a incredibly aggressive, nightmarish persistence hunter that they've basically been neglecting for the last 25 years. And it does that xenomorph thing of like reaching out of ducts and sort of tearing them apart and biting their heads off and just generally being thoroughly unpleasant. It's a lot of fun.
That was 2 sentences, so you nailed it.
Thanks.
No, I love the book. I've only read the first issue. Casper Wingard draws it, and
I should have mentioned that, shouldn't I? Jesus.
I picked it up for you. You could have just acted like you
Thanks.
did, but you really you really shined a spotlight on that. But wow. Casper's amazing. He's really, and I've been a fan of Casper's stuff for so long, but he's really on a different, like channeling something really different here, something really rough and primordial and just amazing colors. I think it's really a beautiful book. And I love that. When you visualize the book, like, was it with Casper? Like, did you imagine this with Casper? Did you come up with it with him? Was it an idea you had and you brought to him? Because he adds so much to it, and in a way that I wouldn't expect him to, if that makes sense. He feels like he's doing something different than he normally does.
It was really sort of serendipitous, right? Because before I knew I was going to be going through an imprint, and to be perfectly candid, like before I knew there was going to be any money, I was going to do the thing of kind of asking people on like Behance or DeviantArt or Instagram. I was going to look for some newcomers who I could do it on a sort of equity split with, because like I don't have any money, and I ended up talking to Casper, and I was just said, look, obviously, I'd be kind of straight down the line with all this, nothing, no funny business, but is there anyone that you've got your eye on that you think could kind of handle this? Mm-hmm. And like over the course of a couple of weeks, man, like I told him the idea, but I told him the idea, not to kind of get him on the hook to draw the thing, but to give him a sense of, who to look for.
Sure.
And instead, like he just ended up sort of, sending me like some concept stuff, and the concept stuff kind of kept coming after a couple of weeks, right? And in the end, he just kind of went like, look, like I really want to do this. Like if you can make the financials work, like I'll just do it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, which is just, it was great, man. And like he had a couple stipulations, and it was, like we couldn't really kind of stick around because, he's very, like he's really in demand, and rightly so. So like he was like basically, we have this window, right, to do this thing. So like you can't kind of take a year to kind of sit and digest this thing. Like we would have to kind of hit the ground at a sprint. So like I ended up talking to Chris Ryle, late of IDW. And basically that's how we ended up sort of going through the imprint is basically it was a much sort of Casper could kind of get what he rightly expects and deserves to do the book, and it just removed like a lot of roadblocks. And there's a layer of editorial which frankly makes me more comfortable, because like I think I'm someone who kind of needs editors.
I think everyone is someone who kind of needs editors. I'll just put that out there.
Yeah.
I don't believe in the like no one in the writers who don't need editors. I don't think that's a real thing.
I don't either. Yeah. Like I'm sure they exist, but yeah, like I'm definitely not one of them. I like that kind of having that kind of gut check. And then we were kind of off to the races. But yeah, he changed his style up really kind of conspicuously, and I think that was one of the reasons why he wanted to do it. So he's adopted this. His stuff's always been like very detailed, but he's always been, I think, associated with being like quite a clean-lined guy.
Yeah.
And now, for this, he's it's almost like a sort of, there's like a charcoaliness to it.
For sure, yeah.
That I think is kind of great. And
there's this kind of like watching the animals in the beginning and the opening, like there's this sort of like they're detailed and they're beautiful, but there is this kind of like cave painting energy to them, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I was like, oh, it's such a brilliant direction for the art. It's such a brilliant, like, with what the story is, it's such a smart way to like introduce these things, is this sort of like detailed and stylized, rudimentary, rough look to them. It's really beautiful book.
Another thing I'll say is Haas has done something with this that I think is ridiculous, which is he's because the lettering almost feels kind of diegetic, because he's using line weights that kind of correspond to Casper's art. So that sort of charcoaly, like rough hewn looking line. Like he's even got like balloons that aren't even complete. They sort of taper away. Mm-hmm. So they really they tail behind characters sometimes. So they really feel like native, like, because again, sort of coming up through sort of 90s comics and everything, when it was all sort of very kind of experimental, there was a definite, if lettering looks too crisp, it sort of floats on top of the art. Mm-hmm. But this is like, it really kind of feels embedded. It's part of the composition. It's just great.
I don't know. There's no letterer, Hassan. I don't know a single letterer in comics, and I've worked with so many great letterers. But Haas has an ability to just blend in with the art like a chameleon, like no one I've ever seen before. It is really stunning the way he just like understands what a page how to not be intrusive on a page. He just knows how to do that in a way that is so like he's in the art. He's you know, like he's the art, as much the art team on a book as anything else. And I'm always like sort of blown away by his work. As someone who works with him regularly, I think he's just constantly amazing. I wanted to sort of going back to the pitch for it that you gave, the xenomorph, the Tarzan as the alien in Alien. You know, I remember you talking to me about the book and saying that, and I sort of got it and was like, okay, yeah, that's a cool idea. It wasn't until I read the book that I realized your commitment to it. Mm-hmm. And your commitment to it is really what I think makes the book a sort of next level thing.
Oh, thanks, man.
It's a great idea, and it's a well-written book, and it's a beautiful book, and it's great. But your commitment to selling the idea of the human as the alien and something to be afraid of, and the aliens as our protagonists and our characters, and I was just so impressed by it, because I can't sort of wrap my head around the idea of doing this book with these very strange aliens who have strange physiology and a strange culture, and then you have just a human kid in a loincloth and not spending time.
Oh, there's no loincloth.
Yeah, well, there's a human kid in all his glory, and I can't imagine once he appears that my brain wouldn't be screaming, okay, now he's the protagonist of the story. Like now a human has entered and we need to follow him. And you do such a good job of sticking to the idea that he's the antagonist. He's the monster in the story. It is so compelling and alienating in the best way. And I'm sort of wondering, like, was there a version of this where you follow the human more, where you follow the kid, where he's more your story?
Yeah, there was. In fact, and like this is like a writer in our group strongly urged me to take that route. Mm-hmm. And I thought about it, and I agree that it's easier to do that.
Sure.
Because then you're kind of casting him as victim. But then you also have to, this is someone who's pre-linguistic, right?
Yeah.
So then all of a sudden you either have a silent comic, or you have like very kind of elevated narration, which I'll be kind of candid. Like, I mean, I find that like exhausting. Like I can do it, but I find that exhausting.
Of course.
Mainly because I don't want it to be shitty. But in the end, I just had this very strong conviction that like I should do it from the alien perspective. But that threw up a lot of challenges for Casper in particular, right? Because, I mean, you've alluded to it, right? Like these aliens have quite sort of odd physiology, right? Like in the sense that they're basically squid things, right? They're sort of jellyfish things, but they have this ability to wrap themselves around like the brain stems of vertebrates and sort of take them over.
Yeah.
But their civilization is now so advanced that they basically make the bodies that they take over.
Yeah.
And so they're so kind of far away from that sort of ugly. I mean, there was a lot in there about. I was just thinking about kind of colonialism, about the sort of the distance from atrocity, and how eventually, the number of sort of Victorian people, the Victorians who would, calmly ask, one lump of sugar or two in your tea, completely oblivious. And there's a whole chain of accountability set up to make them oblivious to the fact that sugar is like drenched in blood.
Yeah.
And like they have that relationship with bodies. I mean, I mentioned in the first issue, like they pick their bodies up from showrooms now.
Yeah.
And I was kind of thinking, in the same way that you or I would kind of go into like a grocery store and you buy a bag of chicken, and it's entirely possible to go through your life without knowing what a chicken looks like and still eating chicken.
Sure, yeah.
So they have a sort of similar relationship to it. But the challenge for Casper with those aliens was, because I said to him, in the initial brief, I was like, I want them to be alien, right? Like, absolutely no disrespect to like James Cameron or whatever, but like, I didn't understand. I have a greater respect, I think, for things like Avatar now, having done this, because I was kind of going like, man, like look at like the Na'vi, like they're just like tall people, right?
Yeah.
They've got like big manga eyes and stuff, but then as we were going through, and like Casper was giving me these like very beautiful, very alien designs, and I was just kind of going like, oh shit, like I'm expecting people to empathize with something that has no eyes and no mouth.
Yeah,
and then you kind of go back to that, that Scott McCloud thing in Understanding Comics, where it's like the bare minimum that is required to sort of imprint on a drawing, right, is like a circle, 2 dots, and a smile, right?
Yeah,
that's the bare minimum you need. And so, like, as we were going along and sort of iterating, basically, it became like, it was so weird. Like, we just ended up with this point where it's like, we've got to give them like eyebrows, basically. Like, they have to be able to frown. They have to be able to scowl. They have to be able to smile. And so they just became like progressively more and more human. It was the weirdest thing, but like totally by necessity. Because if I'm expecting readers to kind of identify with these characters over the course of 5 issues, like there isn't any way around it.
You do a funny thing in it that I loved, that really kind of blew me away in the first issue, that is a writing empathy trick, which is that you meet the characters and they're scientists who you meet when you start, and there's familial relationships and whatever, and they're scientists, and then you meet military characters, and like you start by meeting a sort of general figure, but then you go to like these soldiers who are on the ground, and they talk differently, and they talk more working class. They're less eloquent. They're using sort of less refined language. They're speaking sort of more gruffly and more bluntly, and it's brilliant. It's a brilliant moment, because you think you understand what their society is from the way that you've watched the scientists and the generals talk in this very formal way, and then you realize like, oh, this is actually, these people don't get their hands dirty in the same way, and the people who are going to get their hands dirty and deal with this alien, like they're not this refined upper class people. They're working class people who are going to suffer for this. And I think it, like, seeing that linguistic tick where they're just, the speech patterns change towards the back half of the book, I was so immediately like, it's so evocative of all these things of class struggle and the way we, the way we use poor people's bodies and working class people's bodies to be on the front line, and like what that means for this story being a sort of horror story, and like who is perpetuating the horror and who are the victims of the horror. All these things were sort of evoked by just some dialogue shifts, and I was really just like kind of like cursing you out while I read it, because it's so good and so smart. And I was like, it's so humanizing to them too, in the same way that you're talking about, well, we need them to have eyebrows. Now I understand a class structure. Now I understand an education system. Now I understand all these a power hierarchy that I didn't understand before, just from these little cues. And it's such a smart humanizing moment for something. And I think that goes back to sort of what I was saying before, that you always find the humanity in your in these hard science fiction ideas. And I really loved it in the book. I thought it was just a breathtakingly good thing that most people won't notice. They'll take it in, but won't be able to point to it and say like, this is this, but it'll subconsciously enter their brains in the same way that, like, a movie like, take Alien, for example, is a great example. Like, Alien's a blue collar, they're miners, they're not scientists, they're
dude, like I was doing a podcast last night, and it suddenly kind of hit me like Alien is it's a trucker movie about a hitchhiker.
Exactly. It's and it's such a smart beat in Alien to just be like, these aren't the scientists, these aren't the people, these aren't soldiers, these are people getting up to work their job, and like that's all it is. And like you have that moment here of just like in such a smart, subtle way, and I really was like just loved it so much. I love everything about the book. I think it's a great book, and I hope everyone picks it up. And yeah,
it is in shops next month, less than a month away from this recording date, December.
So it'll
7th.
Definitely be out by the time this comes out.
Probably,
yeah. It is in shops now, or in a month, or last month, but it's going out, and you should read it.
Go get it, or you have it.
Yeah, it was in shops. You can buy it from your local cockroach retailer as you brave the nuclear winter.
Yeah. This podcast definitely survives all of that. And on that note, I just want to say, like, Alex, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I was so excited to have you on here because I feel like you're a writer who really looks at the world around you and takes it in and synthesizes it and gives it back to us in ways that are comforting and ways that are thought-provoking and helps us understand it. And it's such an inspiring thing for me always to read what you write. And so I was really excited to get to chat with you, not in you and me just bullshitting on the phone, but actually like discuss everything and talk about All Against All and everything you're doing. And so I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Yeah, thanks so much.
I appreciate that, man. And I would like to kind of, I'd you know, it's reciprocated. You know,
you don't have to do that.
You've been an inspiration to me for a long time.
That's weird. And on that note,
how is what you said not weird and what I said weird? How does that?
He does this every week. Anybody says anything kind of nice, and he's like, "Ew."
It doesn't sound good for you. It doesn't sound good. Like people who listen to this have read my stuff, and when you're like, "Oh, I really love it," it doesn't come off good for you. That's not a good look for you.
But like you're a New Yorker, right? And like but like and okay, like I'm a Londoner.
That's
true.
We're
both horrible, cynical people. Like
that's true.
I don't understand how what I just said is somehow dripping with insincerity.
No, what you said is it wasn't insincere. It just sounds silly.
No, I meant it, man.
It sounds goofy.
Jeez.
Thank you so much, Alex. It was awesome.
Thanks for having me.
And that brings us to the end of part 2 of our discussion with Alex Paknadel. Make sure to follow Alex on Twitter at Alex Paknadel and check out All Against All at a comic shop near you. To get the latest episodes of this podcast, as well as news, giveaways, and even comics delivered straight to your inbox, go to ashcanpress.com and sign up for the newsletter. We'll be back next week with another wonderful guest. And in the meantime, you can write to us at ideasdon'tbleedpod@gmail.com or tweet to Matthew Rosenberg at Ashcan Press on Twitter, me at Tales to Astonish, or Griffin at Griff Sheridan. We'll include some of your correspondence on the show, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. And big thanks to Summer People for our theme song, Where's the Poison? Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Where is the poison?